All right, well, good evening and welcome to the Hospital City Council for Wednesday, September 2nd. Everybody, join us.
Can't go any further.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. We'll go ahead and do roll call.
Mayor Zaragoza,
Here.
Vice Mayor Thomas,
Here.
Councilmember Acuna, Councilmember Acuna,
Still here.
Councilmember Borelli,
Here.
Councilmember Taylor.
She's muted, but she's here.
I heard her say here.
We can read lips.
We read our lips.
Here.
Over there. All right, so quorum is established. Thank you, Regina. Moving on to item 3, announcements to the public. Do we have anything? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the adoption of the agenda.
Move for adoption.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Seeing none, all right. We'll go ahead and move on to public comments. Public comments for non-agenda items will not be taken at this special meeting. Public comments on agenda items will be taken during that agenda item. So I guess that means we don't have any public comments then? Nothing at this time. All right, thank you. All right, well, that makes it easy. Okay, then, we will move on then to item 6, our discussion and action items. Item 6.1, fiscal year 2020-2021 operating budget and capital improvement programs budget review and discussions.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll start out and then turn it over to Dave Warren, our Director of Finance. Thank you for being here. We're ready to hopefully give you the information necessary that you will be prepared for the next 2 meetings now to adopt the budget on September 8th, next week. We'll hold a public hearing, correct, Dave? Right. And that is normal, and then you will adopt at your meeting on September 22nd. As many of you know, we've presented some information. I have with most of you now that our sales tax numbers came in more favorable than we expected, and we're still a little bit nervous about those numbers. We do not have the detail yet. We hope to have that next Monday or Tuesday around that time, which will enable us to evaluate that further. But we feel much more comfortable based on the numbers that have come in and the numbers that we're getting, information we're getting from HDL, and Dave will go into that further in his presentation, that we think we made good moves in what we've done to date. Some of those things that we've potentially discussed in terms of personnel with you in the past, we're going to address those tonight, and we think we're in a better position. So some of the cuts we were talking about may not have to happen, but we'll go into that further during the presentation. So tonight, we are not going to go into all of the detail that we went into last May. This is going to be more of a review of that and an update to know where we are in terms of revenue and our recommendations going forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dave Warren, and we'll go.
I have one thing
Yes.
to say,
Yes.
and I hate to say this, but I told you so.
Well,
And I'm telling you now, all you have to do is go down to Home Depot.
I know.
It's not gonna change.
yeah, the big thing we were concerned about was not so much what we recommended.
I know,
It was the
I'm
card-
just teasing you.
The card dealerships was what I was worried about.
Exactly,
But apparently, we're
they-
still waiting, like I say, to get those numbers,
Yeah.
the detailed numbers that we don't have.
Right.
And then still a little bit nervous about where we are going forward, so.
I know.
We're still not out of this, but
Right.
Thank you, I agree with that, yeah. We've done well.
I just had to say it.
I was just there. It's a money zoo. I've definitely done my part this year at Home Depot.
Yeah, me too.
thank you for being here tonight, Mayor and City Council. We'll start out with the PowerPoint presentation. Kind of talk about kind of at the 10,000-foot level, the discussion tonight. So the first thing is we will review your budget assumptions. Cleve's kind of already done that. We'll also present the CIP budget assumptions. This will be the first time we've presented those to you, your capital improvement program budget, and then the budget adoption process, how we're actually going to hopefully adopt the budget later in September. So you may recall at your budget workshop that was held on May 13th, we began with a $1.6 million general fund budget deficit, pretty staggering, about 15% of your general fund. And your department heads went back to the budget and trimmed back as much as they could. We looked at your last workshop, your capital outlay, your equipment budget, essentially, health and safety training, which was included in that budget. We considered, at that point, at the last workshop, we were dealing with a $664,000 budget deficit in your general fund. And at that point, we really didn't have a whole lot of materials and supplies to cut back. So then you directed us to go back and talk to our labor groups about potential personnel savings, which we did. And we'll talk more about what those are through the alternative service level process. Cleve developed the voluntary separation incentive program. Those folks the employees that were close to retiring or, at or near retirement, creating a program to incentivize them to retire, therefore creating savings in your budget. And good news, we actually had 9 individuals that have agreed to that, and I think we have most of those, if not all of those agreements in place. So what that will do is create $391,000 in annual ongoing savings before one-time costs. So we do have to pay out their lead banks, we have the incentive costs, but on an ongoing basis, it's going to save your general fund alone $391,000. The budget tonight does not assume any cannabis permit revenue. There may be a chance we get a little bit of that this year, but we're not counting on it because there's a lot of moving parts there and uncertainties. Your budget does not include any retiree medical insurance pre-funding. We pay as you go, so for our retirees, we pay what we're actually required to pay this year, but there's nothing for the future, just full disclosure. Jumping into sales tax, Mr. Morris mentioned good news about our sales tax. So you may recall at our second mid-year budget report and also your budget workshop, we talked about the staggering forecast we were getting. HDL was actually forecasting a 36.01 increase in our sales tax for the second quarter of 2020. That would have been a loss to your general fund of $373,000 just for that one quarter. Pretty staggering. So on the 20th of August, I got online to the state's website that we can access our true-up for the second quarter in August. And lo and behold, we actually had an increase, if you can believe, about fell out of my chair, of 18.95%, or $225,000. And that's with adjustments. So some of that growth was from prior quarters where they underreported. So when you take into account those adjustments, the actual increase was about $106,000 or 10.25%, but still completely on the opposite side of the spectrum.
It could have gone the other way.
Yeah, and we have some theories. I spoke with HDL because it was hard to kind of comprehend that we had an increase in this environment, but what they told me is the state overall is up by 5%.
Wow.
There was an agency that had an increase of 50%. Now, having phone calls with their clients, they actually spoke with a few clients that were having a hard time making payroll too. So there's a variety of different situations. So the theory is, we all know that hoarding was going on. There was a lot of people buying probably more product than they really needed. They were spending more money they normally would, say on toilet paper and other products that were scarce. Folks that all of a sudden had to work at home, maybe they didn't have a computer, they had to buy a new computer or a desk. Their kids no longer going to school, they have to, stream at home, and they may have had to buy a new computer for their child or a desk, so on and so forth, other supplies. home improvement is really through the roof right now. People that were sitting at home twiddling their, what do? I want to do that remodel or whatever. So spending money, construction costs both in the public and private sector are very strong right now. So all those things. The other piece of this is your county pool sales tax. So when folks buy online, whether they're in Placerville or South Lake Tahoe or Cameron Park, we get a piece of the action. We get our proportional share of our point of sale sales tax. So if everybody in El Dorado County is buying more online, that can exponentially affect our county pool sales tax. So I think a lot of the growth is from that. And keep in mind, all of our top 25 businesses were still in operation, even in sheltering in place, maybe at a minimal level, but, so.
So does it, do you mind if I was holding questions till the end?
Absolutely.
When I look at this, and I look at HDL, and they're supposed to be the smart guys in the room when it comes to this stuff, how could they miss it so bad?
And argue with you.
And, excuse me just a second. And this is the people that we're counting on to help us with this, with our taxes and our projections, and we're counting on them to give us good information to make decisions.
In their defense, they're not the only, they have economists, and they're not the only economists that said doom and gloom. That this was really, matter of fact, most economists said in California, the second quarter was gonna be the worst when it comes to just general economic activity, because the sheltering in place was the longest period, through this so far.
And I imagine they didn't have full knowledge of what the governor would be permitting and not permitting, and so there was some, variabilities there, but.
We haven't had a pandemic in 100 years.
Right, even.
To this degree, yeah.
It seems like they would have come out with some more intermediate, projections.
Well, and they did. We met with them, Dave, and they lowered their projections as we
June.
were going through in
Right.
June when we met with them.
Okay.
But we kind of waited to see because that was still based on assumptions,
Right.
basically.
All right.
And they were state averages, that,
Yeah.
you know, some of the percentages. Right. One of the other pieces to your advantage, you live in a rural, semi-rural area. And as you've probably seen, real estate's really hot right now because folks are moving from the high-density areas to the rural areas because of a variety of reasons. Social unrest, sheltering in place, our numbers being lower here, for COVID. So I'll take it.
Yeah, I mean,
We're very blessed with what we have. And
I think you're right. The ruralness of our area, I mean, 'cause you go to downtown Sacramento, I mean, every day there's a new restaurant or business that gets announced that's closing down. Because it's just not sort of unsustainable in that kind of, area. And so, yeah, we've been, I guess, lucky from geography standpoint, you know, we've been able to withstand. We haven't had the closures that I've seen in other big cities, at least.
Kind of follow up on this is, would it be, reasonable, or maybe you already have, asked HDL to look at how they missed so bad once the dust settled?
Look at what, Mike?
Yeah, actually.
Why did they, what did they miss? What, you know, have them
Well,
examine
Dave,
what really
didn't you
happened?
just kind of share with us
Give us
what
a
they said?
report.
This is more of the things I said were
Theory.
more theory, and I bounced that off, we bounced ideas off each other. I'm more familiar with Placerville than they are, but they're more, you know, with the whole state. So the state has actually provided HDL the raw data, last week. They're working on it, cleaning it up, and analyzing it, and they'll have that for us early next week, as Cleve said. So we'll be able to delve into where the variations are. How did our car dealers do? How did home improvement do? How did our restaurants do? So on and so forth. And that'll tell the story as to, you know, how the city did overall. And online sales tax, I really think, is going to be, so you have, you know, a paradigm shift too. Online sales tax has slowly become a bigger contributor to our sales tax, and it exponentially was affected by COVID. So I think you're gonna find that that's a big player.
The other
Dave,
thing-
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
With the state and county pools for online sales, did I understand you correctly that anyone that spends money online in El Dorado County, Placerville gets a share of that?
Correct.
Or is it just, it's not just the Placerville city residents that we are collecting sales tax on is we just get a percentage of all of El Dorado County sales?
That's correct. So,
Oh.
as long as the vendor doesn't have a brick and mortar presence in the county,
Mm-hmm.
we get, let's just easy math. Let's say our point of sale sales tax is 10% of the whole county. And county sales tax overall, point of sale is $1 million. We would get $100,000 or 10%, $100,000 of that, if you will, or 10%. That makes
Okay.
sense. Yep.
That's good. That's good news. That's good for us.
Dave, is that pro rata share, is that state, like, is that how it's worked out, like, by municipality, or does each county have a breakdown, how they divide that?
Yeah, there's two pools. So you have the county pool, which we just spoke about, and then you have the state pool, where if something is shipped, in the state, but it's not clear where it went, then it goes to the state pool, which is relatively small. If there's a distribution center, and then from there, they can't really track where it went. We get a piece of that, but it's very small. But I'm sure that even went up too, a little bit, with online sales.
So it doesn't matter if an item is bought from someone in Placerville, it all goes into the same for El Dorado County.
Correct. Now, the only thing with your add-ons, you know, your Measure J, H, and L, we don't get county pool for that. So you're gonna see a variation on the next slide of our increase wasn't as robust for our add-on sales taxes because we don't participate in the pool. Those don't pool money, if you will.
The other factor I wanted to mention is, and I've said this a couple of times, is part of the issue with sales tax going down is whether or not people were buying things, whether they could afford to buy things if they were laid off or whatever. And if you look at the primary makeup of the jobs in Placerville, the hospital, schools, city, county, EID, they all kept working. They were all paying their employees, as far as I know, for the most part. I know there was a little bit of issue maybe at the hospital that I heard, but for the most part, they continued to pay their employees, so they were still able to continue purchasing and et cetera.
Now, going through this fiscal year, it could be that some folks spent their wad, if you will, and they may squelch their spending because they already spent it in the previous quarter, so we have to be aware of that. Some of it may have been bought up with debt, with credit cards or whatever. So I don't see that growth being sustainable through the fiscal year, but I do see it at least, you know, becoming more normal. And I'm hoping HDL
If we can just maintain that, it'd be good.
Exactly. So looking at our Bradley Burns sales tax, which is general fund sales tax, fiscal year 1920, we ended up with $5,482,507. HDL is forecasting just real rough statewide negative 1.1%. So you basically take that number and discount it by 98.9%, 98.9, and you come up with $5,422,000. Assuming in this year's budget for right now. And Cleve and I talked about if you adopt the budget with that assumption, we're gonna watch every quarter to see, are we tracking or not? And if we're not, we're gonna, you know, basically come back to you and say, hey, Houston, we have a problem. We wanna be able to react quickly. And then your add-on sales taxes, again, H, J, and L. Over year, the second quarter, actually on a cash basis increased by 7% as of June 30th, with adjustments. But when you take those adjustments out, it actually experienced a 9% decrease. Now, again, those measures, are not receiving pool money, and if the city of Placerville citizens aren't buying cars at the same rate as those outside the city limits, that can affect the difference, that could create that delta, the difference between your Bradley Burns at 18%, and versus a 9% down. So, but still relatively good news.
What about home sales?
Homes, real estate is, I have a friend that's a real estate agent, and it's hot right now. Bidding wars going on, anything under 500,000, it's
But So a lot of people are selling for a lot, and the house is becoming more valuable, so doesn't that increase our,
It can help with our property tax, but it usually takes about a year for the assessments to happen. But yeah, the transfer tax,
Right.
we get a piece of the pie every time there's a sale.
right,
Our transfer tax, that should help it stay healthy, which is about $40 a year.
okay.
Good question. Okay, so, this is just broad brush on your CIP. We haven't talked about CIP yet. The CIP budget, which Rebecca and the other department heads will touch on, it includes one parking fund project, which is Town Hall parking lot. Last Monday, the Measure H, NL Sales Tax Committee recommended 5 new projects, which Rebecca will cover, and then additional funding for 5 existing projects. And the establishment of some construction reserves for both Measure H and L. We're working on a policy. The committee's looked at the first blush of that policy, and we're still working through that, but, either the second meeting in September or probably the first meeting in October, we'll share that with you, or what that would be, and see if you're comfortable with it. And then also shoring up your operating reserves. And then as far as the adoption, as you may recall, because we weren't able to demonstrate a balanced budget last June, you adopted a 25% continuation, which keeps our lights on through September 30th. So the goal is to hold an open hearing on the 8th of September, and then come back, if everything looks good, the 120-page document, and ask that you adopt it on September 22nd. So, any questions so far? Council, okay, what we'll do is, shift gears, and I'll bring up the CIP budget, and turn it over to... So the first,
Oh, that's right,
okay.
he's not here yet.
So why don't we move down to the building permit software, and Mr. Rivas, if you could kind of give us an overview of what that project's about. Pierre, are you there?
Don't see Pierre.
Okay, why don't we go down to city pool filter and sand replacement.
Hi, can you hear me? This is Terry.
Yes.
Okay. As far as the filter sand replacement, this was on the CIP when I came in 2019. It's been a project that's always been a kind of a wish list item. The filter sand, the pool works best when the sand is replaced. I think it's between 6 and 7 years. And we're probably a little beyond that, but it's one of those things that in a budget full of difficult decisions, this was not that difficult to put off because it doesn't really affect the operation of the pool substantially to still work with the sand that we have. We do have a way of trying to backwash it, and it's just not as efficient. And then the next item, which is the town hall recarpeting, that's one that's been on the wish list for a while too. And we did get some good bids on it, but this was the downstairs office area, which it's fairly worn. I'd say it's past its useful life in the office area. And then this was also going to be followed up by adding some carpet and some padding to kind of quiet the footsteps upstairs. I know all of you have experienced having an exercise class above you during city council meetings or other meetings. So this would go toward that. But these were both fairly easy to say. We can hold off on them for now. And I'll take any questions.
Any questions for Terry?
Terry on those?
Nope.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next one, the Wine Sap Circle slurry seal, and Mr. Stone, can you cover that one?
Yes, that's just the slurry seal for Wine Sap Circle up off of I believe it's Orchard Hill.
You know where it is?
It's pretty self-explanatory. If anybody has any questions about it, I'd be happy to ask them.
And just so you know, this is something that was planned for, is budgeted, as you notice, it comes out of the Ridge and Orchard Hill, Benefit Assessment District. So it's funding that is in that, it's planned for, and there's available funding to do it.
So there's no HL money going towards,
No.
No.
is it eligible for HL money?
I suppose it
Could
is.
be, but I would recommend
Not that I'm saying it
Yeah.
should, I'm just curious as to,
Yeah.
is it a city asset that we're responsible for,
It-
but we have.
It is, but one of the things we did when that subdivision was set up, we budgeted this purposely to help with the maintenance
Correct.
within that part.
Okay, yeah,
So,
thank you, yeah.
Okay.
So Wine Sap Circle is it's the road where when you turn, you go, that's the whole street?
where the houses are, yes.
Yeah, up on the
And
left.
and so how long has that been there that it's
It
requiring?
was established in about 2008.
Wow,
It's actually recommended, correct me if I'm wrong, Rebecca, but after you do a paving job, about 5 years later, you should seal it.
oh,
So that's what we're doing, is just sealing
Oh.
it, and then it extends life, similar to Lower Main Street that we just did. That's been longer than 5 years, but we do that slurry seal to extend the life of it.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Which I
Correct.
just drove, Lower Main Street is beautiful.
Yeah, Nick did a great job
He
organizing that project, yeah, and
Yeah.
they did some crack seal work, beforehand, which actually even just, helps it a little bit longer.
Great.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Just so you
Yeah,
know,
they
they will, between now and next week, they'll be sweeping to clean up some of the gravel that you see and stuff out there, the sand or whatever. And then they'll be striping. There's a 7-day waiting period for this?
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks, Nick. Sorry, I forgot you were there.
Did they put,
Sorry, Nick.
did they put
It's
a
all right.
treatment in for it freezes and all that stuff we've been going through?
Right, so there's a couple of things with that. So type 2 slurry is what they use, which is basically a slurry emulsified with aggregate, and they place it and let it cure essentially, and then they'll do the thermoplastic striping. But the question regarding the freeze-thaw cycle, that's not something that typically addresses. It's a roadway issue. And then the freeze-thaw cycle that's been more problematic for us has been on that bridge.
Oh, that's,
Yeah, and
that's.
not, we don't slurry, you would do,
That's a
you would
separate,
do a deck overlay. Yeah, that's a little bit of a different beast, yeah.
anyway, it's beautiful.
Yeah, they did great.
The remainder of the CIP, Rebecca Needs is gonna cover that.
Yeah, so, first one is Town Hall parking lot. I'm sure we've all kind of witnessed some of the, deficiency in paving on there, as well as anybody that's ever attended a council meeting or a public meeting. And so, we looked at getting some preliminary bids and got some good numbers, and it's looking about 60,000 or so for that effort. They would basically be stripping it down to base, correcting the sub-base of the parking lot, correcting some drainage issues, and repaving. And then, moving on to some of our water reclamation facility projects. You may recall, we actually approved, MTU number 2 a couple years ago, and then recently we added in the, replacement of the under drain system. Well, the replacement of the under drain system is anticipated for the next MTU, so we are looking at including both of those items of work and have budgeted accordingly. The next work project is our secondary clarifier number 1 mechanism replacement. We were able to successfully replace the grout floor. However, the mechanism within the sweeping action of secondary clarifier number 1, which basically looks like a giant milk vat. If you've ever seen the kind of, they're making cheese, it kind of just sweeps around and gently stirs the material. The mechanism within the center of the cylinder facility for the clarifier, the mechanism is settled, and so we're looking at potentially raising that because it's catching. We're also looking at some options for the flooring too, because we did just have that done, and so we're looking at warranty work for that too. And then, also for the wharf, we had digester number 1 service, and now we're looking at getting number 2 service. And you may recall we had some pretty decent impacts with, the 2017 storm filling the digesters with grit and gravel when our headworks took in all the rock and debris from that storm. And so they're designed to fill up at a slow rate. The digester is exactly what it sounds like. It's kind of like the intestines of the plant. So you have healthy critters in there that basically break down the material, and it's actually kind of a unique system because it's self-cycling. It'll, break down the material, it'll release methane gas that then gets recaptured within the digester and feeds it back to the heaters to continue heating and digesting additional material. So,
Was there damage to that?
yes, there was.
Did we not get some,
Yes, we did get some FEMA funding for replacement of the pump.
okay,
And, so when we went to replace the pump, that's when we discovered the issues with the other digester that we've already funded. And we realized that it had filled up with quite a bit of grit and gravel. We said, oh dear, maybe, we need to take a look at this. And we did, and we assessed it. And then basically, what happens is you go in, you clean it all out, you reset the digester, and then you want to put your new pump on. We don't want to just, we were able to get the funding for the pump, but we don't just want to install a pump and then have it get
Absolutely.
damaged through the grit that's already in the digester. So, we didn't want to, waste, that, resource.
so the FEMA money did cover,
Yes, ma'am,
okay,
it did.
Well, it covered the pump.
It
not-
covered the pump, not the
this work.
servicing.
oh, okay.
And I think we did look at that, and we ran into some concerns with many of these items are actually at the end of life, even though maybe some damage was caused by the storms.
So
We
they probably
recognized
wouldn't have reimbursed you?
They probably wouldn't have reimbursed because they were at end of life, and it's more of a maintenance issue than it is actual damage caused.
Correct.
What you understand?
Okay.
And, our staff at the wharf does an awesome job of, making a dollar holler, taking good care of our equipment. Most of these items have, service schedules of, 8 to 10 years at best. And this hasn't been touched since the 2008 upgrade. So, they do a fantastic job of really maintaining and caring after the facility. And so that covers, the 3 wharf projects. And then we also looked at doing, Benham Street repaving, to kind of take the opportunity to have a little bit of a quieter season around the aquatic center, unfortunately. So we looked at trying to pave Benham Street and, get as far up to the connecting, paving point where we Hardy and Big Cut project. So that entire section of road is a nice, clean, paved road. And then, we also added in lead water line replacements as, various locations as a project. We've received a mandate from the state where we have to replace lead water services, and we've been already, chipping away at that through projects. We replaced several on Pacific Street with that paving project. We're replacing several on Spring Street with that construction project. And so, Public Works has done a great job putting together a list of those lead services. And I want to be clear too, they're not the entire service. It's really a gooseneck segment. It's not the entire length of the service. We're talking, 18 inches to 2 feet of pipe is what we're talking about. So it's, not a lot, but it's certainly enough that we want to make sure we're above board on with everybody, but we've already been proactively addressing that. That covers that page.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, I think Mr. Rivas joined us now. Mr. Rivas, if you could speak about the building permit software project?
Yeah, he's there.
Pierre, are you there? Can you unmute and speak? There you go.
Yeah, my apologies. I couldn't hear. Anyways, I want to start by giving the council a little background regarding our permit center permitting software. We're currently using a system called what's it called? Anyways, it's the county's system, and the county is now using Trackit. So it's an obsolete system. It works just fine. The only issue that we have is long-term, eventually the city will not have the ability to acquire maintenance for the software. As long as it doesn't break down, I think we can, we're just fine. But if there is a glitch or we run into a software problem with the system, we will then be without a permitting system. It'll be more of an emergency situation to get something going. So we discovered that back in fiscal year 1920, and back then we were looking at utilizing a module from Navaline, a Navaline product. Our finance department uses Navaline, and so it was going to be a cheaper way of acquiring a module that would be for permitting purposes. We were looking at about $23,000 out of the general fund initially to purchase the software with an annual maintenance of about $1,600 per year. So since then, we've done a lot of research to try and find a cheaper system, and we actually found a system. It's called TrackSoft. And TrackSoft, that was the one that we were making a request for this current fiscal year. That one was estimated about just a little over $5,000 to purchase the software with a annual cost of about $1,200. So it's been probably, I think, a little over 6 months or so since we've spoken with the vendor. So we don't know how current that is. But we're hoping that should in the future something happen to our current permitting software system, that we would be able to acquire this one if it's still available. It's certainly one of the more cheaper systems that we have out there. It has a lot of applications. We would use it for tracking both our planning permits, our building permits, and code enforcement permits. And we can also the engineering department would be able to use it for grading permits, encroachment permits, if they wanted to expand on its use. It would tie in by assessor's parcel number or address. So it's very, very versatile. So that's about all I have on that. If the council has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
I do. You know, this is the age-old question. How would your efficiencies improve with this? I mean, within a year, would we get a return on the $5,335 or whatever that number is?
That's right.
Yes.
Vice Mayor, that's a very, very good question. In fact, I think my more quick answer to that is we're evaluating our fee schedule, and we do have the ability to attach an IT fee to all of our building permits. And so we're evaluating what that cost will be. I mean, say, for example, we could charge $1 for every permit that we issue, and we would hope that that would cover the cost then of both purchase and then the annual maintenance fees for the software. So that's what we're looking at doing, so there would be no cost of the city. It would actually be funded through our permits through an IT fee. But just to answer more directly to your question, yes, efficiency would improve quite a bit. Our processing of permits is a little archaic. A lot of different physical things that we do within the office in terms of handling the receipts, the different hard copies that we need to file, and then record the documents in a number of different places. But a lot of that would be very much streamlined if we had a new system.
Would you be potentially bringing this back in the near future then, if you evaluate that?
Yes, we're looking at bringing this. In fact, we'd like to bring the IT fee sooner rather than later, meaning we don't want to wait until the master fee schedule. I think we need to get this fee in place so we can start collecting that fee. And so it'll make it easier then for us to actually purchase the system without affecting our general fund.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Patty?
Oh, I was also, just along the lines, Pierre mentioned that if it's still available, and I'm wondering how crucial is that? I mean, are we gonna lose out on a good thing if we don't jump now, so.
It is on my list to contact the vendor and, you know, see what the status is of that software product.
Well, and I want to emphasize, hopefully it's still available, because if it's not available, does that mean the company is not as secure to continue maintenance going forward?
Oh,
So,
that's true too. Yeah.
Here, I had a couple questions. Did you say this is the same system the county's using?
No, our current system, and I just remembered what it's called. It's called Approach. Approach is the system that El Dorado County used for issuing their building permits. So the county has been using Approach for many, many years, and their IT department was kind enough to provide maintenance of the software for us at no cost. So, but the county no longer uses Approach. They're now using what's called Trackit. And so they no longer will be supporting the Approach software. So should something happen with Approach, we will not have then probably the capabilities to make the repair.
Okay, so my question was whether we were purchasing, you were proposing purchasing the same program the county currently uses.
No, this is this cheaper one that we're looking at, and this is the one for initial cost of $5,000, just a little over $5,000. It's called TrackSoft. That's the one that we were making this request for. The county is usually is now using a system called Trackit. In fact, the Naviline product that we were looking at using, the module, previously, that's the one that I mentioned we had made a request for in fiscal year 1920. That was the one at about just a little over $23,000 for the initial purchase. That's no longer available. I just was using that for a cost comparison where we're trying to find a cheaper system. But the Naviline, they've been purchased by what's called Central Square, and their system is now the Trackit. They're actually not going to support the Naviline product that we were initially looking at purchasing, so it's not even available. I know the county has had a lot of issue with the Trackit software. In fact, my understanding is they had to hire another consulting IT company to help them get their Trackit actually fully implemented and operational. So I know it's been very difficult for them, but they process far more permits than we do. It would be like trying to mow the lawn with a chainsaw. We don't need something that robust. That's why I think that the TrackSoft would be a kinder, gentler, softer software for our purposes.
Pierre, this has been a request of me, and all the time I've been on the council, there's always been a need for either updating AutoCAD mapping or permit tracking. And there was a little yay here from the engineering department, because we got the AutoCAD pretty well squared away, but they'll upgrade that and take that away. I know this is a huge issue. If we were to go ahead and invest this $5,500 or $5,300, would this help, for example, for all the departments, track what you enter into this new permitting program? Would engineering be able to say, oh, okay, here's a new permit that the second floor issued today?
Yes, I believe so. I believe we'd be able to integrate all those permits because it would be done by both, you know, a parcel and address database. So they all tied together, and it would benefit probably more than just development services, both our planning on our building permits, but also should help with the engineering department in terms of their permitting, the grading permits, encroachment permits, and those kinds of things we could also include in there. It's very, very versatile, and we're able to actually manipulate a lot of the various pages in the software to suit our needs. We were very impressed. They actually, this TrackSoft company originally gave a presentation to the county, to their building division, and I was invited to attend, and I was very impressed. And so we actually had them do a demonstration. It was like a webinar, almost like a Zoom, but it was quite a while ago now, almost a year ago. They gave us a presentation, and everybody was pretty impressed with the capabilities that we would have with this software.
Here, one last question for me, and then the Vice Mayor has another question. But right now, there's a rather cumbersome process when I go in to pay for my permit. I have to go to your floor, and then go downstairs and get my, back upstairs and show it to Lynn. Will this new program streamline that?
You know, I'm not sure. That's probably a conversation I need to have with our finance director and see as far as when you actually pay for the permit. Is that something that could be done through TrackSoft? I think possibly it can, but we would want to make sure that we interface clearly with how finance takes in the money. And
Because there certainly could be some efficiencies created there. I enjoy going up and down the elevator.
I like it. I usually do it on behalf of the customer just to get out of the chair and get that little bit of exercise.
So,
Thank you.
along those similar lines, does this new software have the potential to have online, permitting? So where you can go and fill in an online form and request a permit for, let's say, putting a water heater in?
That's a good question. I think it does. We currently have that capability now. We do allow property owners to, and contractors, they can do a fillable building permit application online, and then they submit it to us online, and we process it. And we basically send it back. We send their permit back with the receipt, because we take things over credit card. So we've been doing everything. Because of the COVID-19, we're doing a lot of permitting that way, and it's actually streamlined and made things a lot more efficient as far as our online capabilities. But I think this new software would probably enhance that process that we're currently engaged in with doing online permitting.
Pierre, I have a question on, whenever there's a new software program, migration of legacy data. Is there anything, would that be a seamless process, or is that not even an issue with this particular product?
Yeah, that was a question that I distinctly recall that the staff had asked of the vendor's representative, and he made it clear that it would be very easy to migrate all of our data into the new database with the new system. So there wasn't going to be any issue with that.
Okay, that's always my concern with
Yeah.
data, the migration. That's where they get hung up. Just look at the 1970s DMV databases that they have.
It hasn't improved much, has it?
No, they never can find someone that can migrate it well.
No legacy out there. Well, I would make a recommendation that we include this, because I think there's clear evidence that between pending improvements with fee structure and the efficiencies that this, if it's still available at this price,
Right.
that this program brings to the second floor and to the third floor, and potentially even streamlining for financing.
Yeah, I agree. I think, especially if we're going through the master fee schedule, and it can pay for itself potentially as well.
Sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
There's some areas that we need to spend some time on within it. For example, will this program integrate with the finance program, for cash receipts? Finance has an existing database for all of our parcels in town. Would this be able to migrate with that as well, so we're not having to recreate the wheel? So, the price is attractive. I'm curious as to the robustness of the software, so. But I'd be happy to sit down with Pierre, and we've looked at, as he's indicated, a couple pieces of software and see if this is something that would work overall.
You have to be
I
careful
think
what
it's
you,
worth looking
get
into
what you
and
pay
doing
for type of
further
thing.
studies.
So it might be too good of a price.
But look at the county, they bought a more expensive product and had to have it
It's true.
forced
Oh,
installed.
that was the county went through a big turmoil.
That's the ultimate
Exactly.
nightmare, is how these.
The other thing I like is Pierre's idea of incorporating, in the fees.
Yeah, that's why I suggested.
More, I think we
Brilliant.
need to do more than $1.
He should be going like $10 a permit or something.
So, yeah, but more than $1.
There's a lot of paper.
So unless I'm hearing anything else negative from council, we will go back and investigate and look at incorporating this into your budget that we bring back to you going forward, so.
Yeah.
Uh, Chief Wren wanted to be here. He got caught up in another meeting. So, just real quick, the public safety building renovation, I know you see this every year.
My goodness.
And they really need to do something there. It just comes down to dollars and cents. And, as you may recall, this is a plan that goes back to 2000, when we had an architect look at the building and the needs of the police department, the existing building, as well as additional square footage. We'll keep that on our radar, but for right now, we're not recommending funding anything right now until we can secure a grant or some type of financing.
You recall, though, that we did approve the MOU with El Dorado County Fire
Yes.
to do a feasibility study. That funding is still available in our budget.
Okay.
Due to COVID, I've talked to the fire chief, and we decided to delay that till we can hopefully get a little bit more out of this. So we do still want to pursue that. And that'll be a first step in helping us identify funding to move forward with this. So although we're not recommending funding this right now, obviously we don't have $4 million laying around to do it, but we are still working on this project. That's what
I think this is one of those situations that we just keep kicking the can to the next year, and like Dave said, this started in 2000. If we had just had a set of plans, concrete, that who knows what we could have come up with, in that time. And I really would like to see it happen, that we at least get the plans drawn up and find out what we need. And
Yeah. Well, we did the feasibility study.
Did we go after one of those USDA, we looked at, or like the county did, like the sheriff did for that?
We didn't go after it. We looked at it. That is one option, but that's a loan, not a grant.
I realize that.
They're figuring out how to pay for that now.
It's figuring out how to make the payments on it.
Well, I mean, if that's the only thing we can do, then we gotta look at it, I think.
Have to borrow that money.
I'm sorry?
Pardon me, Mr. Tuffy.
You did buy the parcel to the west.
Yes, we did,
That
thank
was a
you.
step in the right
Yes, it was.
So anyway, I think the first step is to do that feasibility study and bring back
Right.
a
The two
solid.
agencies, I
Yes,
think that's really key.
I think so too.
I think that creates some opportunities for us in terms of funding too,
I do too.
in showing that we're working together, so.
Right.
And with the way things are today, with fires and et cetera,
Right,
more funding's gonna be available for fire
sure.
And there's been past discussion, even shared staff, shared equipment, like their weight room, that sort of thing.
Right.
It's really great when you can buy one instead of two.
Right.
Okay. Moving on to the next handout, we have your, proposed Measure HL Capital Improvement Program budget, which the committee, recommended to you. We still are working on, the construction reserve policy, which we plan on bringing to you as a separate item, most likely the first meeting in October. But I'll go ahead and hand it over to Rebecca Neves to kind of go through all the components, because she is most intimate with this. So with that, walk us through this.
Sure.
Dave, I think there's a way to hide those, on the right. Yes, that one maybe? Yeah, there you go.
So, at first blush, it looks like we're not adding a whole lot, and, that would be true. But, it's also important for us to understand that we currently have about 70 or so projects already on the books. And so, we're looking at delivering on those commitments. COVID has afforded just about everybody the blessing and the opportunity to regroup, and we're no exception to that. So, we do have quite a few large projects coming forward in this next year, that, we need to look at how we're gonna fund the construction needs for them, as well as, coupled with the uncertain revenue amount, related to COVID that we talked about. Right now it looks great, but we don't know what the next quarter will do too. So just taking a much more, conservative approach to this year's CIP and H&L CIP list. So, the first one, we actually already covered, when we were discussing this, the proposed list for this year. So the MTU #1, as well as the secondary clarifier and the digester servicing Venom and the lead water line replacement. So I won't bore you with the details of going through those yet again. You may recall, we got the recommendation, and council approved the recommendation on the August 25th meeting for the Mosquito Road Stabilization Project, which starts construction in, I believe, about 13 days. but who's counting down? We are moving forward on getting submittals with that project right now, and that was, coupled with the Spring Street Road Rehabilitation Project as well. So we're very excited to see those two projects going out, so you'll start to see some notifications regarding traffic control and closures and things like that as they start the work. We also have another project on here that is already on the books, which is the Broadway Maintenance Project. You may recall, some time ago, we had brought this forward. It was the 1920 CIP, or it feels like a long time ago, I guess it was just last fiscal year. But we brought forward a Broadway Maintenance Project. So right now, we're working on Upper Broadway bike lanes, right? So that goes from Schnell School Road to Point View Drive. And we're putting in, new facilities, and we're also doing quite a bit of roadway improvements. So what happens after that project gets done? The next question that comes along is, great, when are you doing the rest of it, right? So this project is the rest of it. And so we were actually able to work with Caltrans Local Assistance and our federal funding source, the Highway Safety Improvement Program, for our Broadway Sidewalks project. Now, we received funding on Broadway to replace the sidewalks, and, not replace, excuse me, improve gap closures and pedestrian facilities on Broadway from the Mosquito Road Main Street intersection heading east towards Schnell School Road. And that project was, we asked for an extension for the reason of we can sync it up with this project. There's no real benefit to replacing sidewalks if the road you're trying to attach it to is falling apart on you. So we took this as an opportunity to, okay, let's pump the brakes on that job and speed up this other one and meet them in the middle and send it out as one bid package. Now, the Broadway Maintenance Project isn't just for roadway improvements. There are some infrastructure improvements, including minor sewer connections improvements, some storm drain, and overall abandonment of an old 4-inch water line that has proven to be a bit of a maintenance concern for us for a couple of years now. So we're looking at replacing those items and then paving above and doing the sidewalks as a complete project. So, you know, with the completion of this and the Broadway Sidewalks project and Upper Broadway bike lanes, that pretty much completes all of Broadway. So, which is like, okay, check, on to the next, right? So, and on to the next is another project that we've been working on diligently for a while. This one's a bit of a big undertaking, just because there's not really a great solution on how we're gonna do it, and that is the Cedar Ravine Road sewer line replacement. You may recall we have some old dilapidated sewer lines that are located within Cedar Ravine Creek. We are looking at how to relocate those lines out of the creek, some of which the mains go underneath houses adjacent to Cedar Ravine.
Oh, my gosh.
So pulling that out
Oh, my
and
gosh.
trying to put it in the street. So we're actually gonna be bringing to you, in the next month or two, a feasibility study, a draft feasibility study, and requesting direction on how, what the most reasonable and comfortable approach would be for us to do that undertaking. But as we're eating that elephant one bite at a time, we're adding some funds in there to keep us going, as far as design, and then, you know, once we have a feasibility or a concept, you know, then we can proceed through environmental and design and move forward with that project. Ultimately getting it shovel-ready, because actually that project is a great candidate for like water quality grant funding. So, you know, we wanna get that one to a place where, you know, it's a great application. And second to that one is also the sewer line relocation from Clay to Locust Street. There is a fair amount of sewer that was still left over after the Highway 50 Ops project had done some relocation of the sewer main out of the creek, out of Hangtown Creek, into the trail area. We have the rest of it that we need to complete, and that project also will be bringing a feasibility study to your attention in the next couple of months to assess a potential option of either moving the sewer main into the trail or relocating into Maine because of the depths that we would need to place the new sewer line if we placed it in the trails, and the existing connections that are on the opposite side of the creek. So we do have a version of that project designed right now, which relocates that line into the trail. And if we got to a point where if the funding fairy arrived tomorrow and granted us $1.5 million, I would say, awesome, let's build it. But, you know, if we do have a chance to take a breath and see if there's maybe a better, way to do it, then I think it's worthwhile also. Then we also, and I will, you know, defer to Dave to chime in with any comments, but we do have our standard, sewer enterprise fund debt service, which is our annual debt service for our water reclamation facility. Helps us pay the bills for our, 2008 upgrade, 2007 upgrade. And, then the two items that, you know, Dave briefly spoke about developing a policy is, the construction reserves for Measure H and Measure L. The intent with the construction reserves, and again, this kind of goes back to COVID gave us a good chance to regroup. So one of the things that has been coming up pretty consistently is we will budget, you know, historically, we would budget for a project all the way through construction, right? But what we're finding is we're delivering these projects so fast that we need the construction funds faster, and then now, per se, you have construction funding held hostage in another project that's maybe 2 years behind this one that's ready to go. So the construction reserve is a way for us to have some funds that would be dedicated towards existing projects that have already been reviewed and approved by Measure H and L and City Council. So that is the intent of those items. And did I cover it?
Rebecca, I think, unless I missed it, did you skip over, Benham Street up there, paving?
I did talk about it in the original.
I'm sorry.
Talked about
But you
it
know what I
a little
did
earlier.
skip over was Upper Broadway. Thank you. So, item 8 is we would like to add, some Measure L road rehab money onto Upper Broadway bike lanes project. So, as you know, we've been able to find some decent savings, but we're also getting to a point where we found that, you know, as we were working our way from east to west, that items that we had originally in the contract were, essentially slurry seal. At the time when we sent the project out to bid, we didn't have enough funding to repave all of Broadway. We've gotten pretty good and pretty scrappy at the savings, and we've been actually able to repave the majority of it. However, it would leave us a little shy from the Schnell School Road intersection, including some area in the Caltrans right-of-way, and up to the Wiltsey intersection. Now, the Wiltsey intersection's pretty thrashed, and so we did do some storm drain work as part of this project in that area, and even as we were putting back cold patch, the cold patch is actually in better shape than the rest of the road. So, we've been successful at finding some savings. We've had, one unfortunate cost, and, I was a little bummed to see that the unfortunate cost was right around the same amount of price that I have to be asking for right now for paving. So, but we're grateful that we have Measure L. We're grateful that we have this even available to us to help us, fund, these road maintenance projects. And, we're working on the possible change order for that, and to bring it back to council, second meeting in September. And then also, as Dave mentioned, we're gonna be restoring item 14 down on the bottom. We're gonna be restoring the operating reserve, which currently is, been depleted for some of the various reasons I've talked about, where we'd be ready to go to construction, but we didn't have the construction funding available, so we would pull from the reserve. The intent of, Measure L was always to have an operation reserve, as we do for Measure H. For Measure H, it's $80,000, and for Measure L, we're restoring it back to the $200,000 mark. So, that concludes my, summary. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Yes, right there.
Well, 9 and 10, Cedar Ravine and the sewer line relocation, Clay
Yep.
Street to Locust. Does any of that, there's this potential for the, Clay Street Bridge replacement.
Mm-hmm.
How does that play into that? Do those intersect at any point? Is some of that gonna be taken care of through that project as that comes up?
So as far as Cedar Ravine Road sewer line replacement, not much, because majority of the work goes from Pacific and head south.
Right.
The Hangtown Creek sewer, which is the sewer line relocation Clay to Locust, that one would replace a segment of it. However, ideally, it would be awesome if we could deliver that project concurrently with the bridge project, because then you're getting in there one time, one mobilization, and we try to do that with most projects.
Okay. Is this one forecasted out far enough to,
Yes,
okay,
yes.
all right, thank you.
The only caveat to that is, I wanted to mention that working with Woodrow Deloria from the, EDCTC, we have submitted a list of projects to
We have.
our consultant, David Turch, that are kind of our wish list of projects we're looking for funding for. And I believe both of those projects, both the Cedar Ravine and this one, Clay to Locust Sewer Line, are on that list, as well as a number of other
And the
projects.
public safety building too.
Right, the
Yeah.
public safety building,
Yeah.
all of those we have submitted. So the caveat to that is, if the funding came tomorrow, we would probably go ahead and do the project,
Amen.
before that, so.
Yeah, so,
And there is a lot of talk about, project money coming from, the federal government,
yeah, we're hoping
in the
the,
near future. They're talking about, hopefully, if they can get, reach agreement ever,
Right.
money, because they see that as putting people to work. So we'll see if that actually happens. This was a request from David Turch that we submit these
Okay.
projects, so.
I know when we did Canal Street, then there's the road where all of this nice stops and it goes on down. It's really getting bad. And I'm wondering, is there any kind of, since there's schools involved there, does that prompt us maybe?
so that project is a bit more complex in terms of, think of it like a Mosquito Road or a Main Street. There's quite a bit of infrastructure that needs to be replaced.
Oh.
It is already an existing project on our project list.
Okay.
So that was one of the other reasons, and that's a great question. That was one of the other reasons why we took this approach of don't add as many projects. We have commitments all over town on all different types of projects and roads. And, we don't wanna promise and under-deliver, right? So, but we have scoped and created a project for Canal Street for the remainder of the portion that was not repaved with the first, little bit of money that we received when we first got Measure L money.
Well, and I'm thinking too, with the schools not, again, the COVID thing, that
Yeah.
we're not having the traffic that we would have had,
Yeah.
had they been in session.
Yeah, that project will be a bit more of, an effort to design and get out.
Okay.
Yeah, Mosquito Road took about, I'd say, hardcore focused design, took about 18 months to get it from concept to construction.
Uh-huh.
Main Street was, kind of an anomaly just because we delivered it in separate phases of separate years. And Spring Street took 18 to 24 months to
Yes, I know.
Don't we all? But to do the infrastructure
I know,
design and the
okay.
repaving too,
Well,
yeah.
I'm thinking, we approved those 2 housing units, there's John. That, and I didn't know whether there could be a tie-in because of those, creating more,
Good thought.
so.
Yeah, and that would be, if for some reason we needed to design something, like, let's say we were just gonna, peel off the water main replacement in Canal. Then, what we could do is we could look at, scoping some of that construction reserve money on that project because it's an existing project.
Okay.
And we would, of course, run it through the Measure HL committee and bring it back to council. But that's not, that's not currently what we're doing, but that doesn't mean that we can't do that.
Right. Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah, good question.
Driving over there every day now late, and then it's just like, all these things keep coming in my mind.
Yeah, every pothole I hit.
No, I mean, it encourages me to think, well, I wonder if this would, if there could be a anyway. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I have a few comments, and thank you for Rebecca for covering that. First of all, earlier this year, when we met with the committee, I actually projected that we were gonna have shortfalls in both Measure L and Measure H for funding our existing projects. Well, when we crunched the numbers, late last week, early this week, we actually had surplus. So all your previous projects are fully funded, and we actually ended up with a little carryover for this year's projects that Rebecca just went through.
Great.
So, very good news. On the reserves, on the construction reserves, one of the other pieces is if a project comes up that the council wants to construct, but the committee hasn't reviewed it yet, we would bring it back to them. Or if the scope of an existing project that they did approve, we would bring it back to them, for their recommendation to you. So, just wanted to point that out.
Good news.
Yeah, we're hoping that this, it not only creates more flexibility, but when we're having to liquidate, you know, those long resolutions where we're having to liquidate projects to afford, we're trying to avoid that, because it, quite frankly, can become an accounting nightmare with all those changes. So we're hoping that this will, make it easier for everyone.
Oh, good.
Joe, we covered the, public safety building.
I heard everybody
I don't know.
I thought that was background from where I was at, or?
No. We all, I don't know if you have any additional comments regarding that project?
I think we're all on the same page. I mean, everybody's been to the police department and understands the need. And I talked to the city manager today, and he's aware of it, and it just, you know, it's one of those, it's a funding issue. Truly, it really is, so. I still like the idea of the public safety building, the joint public safety building. I think there's opportunities there for shared resources, and, you know, we get along great with our fire departments, so any time we can put our heads together as your public safety team and, try to resolve any kind of issues within the city, we do that, and having them right in the same building with us will be nothing but a positive, so.
Chief? All right. So that's all the information we have on our capital improvement program budget, unless you have any additional questions. We'll move on to what we call ASLs, or alternative service levels. So this is where we either increase program, decrease program, add a position, remove a position. We spoke about earlier the fact that, you know, we started out with a $1.6 million general fund deficit. We trimmed it back down to 664, but at that point, we were looking at personnel and how do we close that gap. And so we did meet with our labor units and talked about opportunities of folks retiring, possibly positions that were becoming vacant. And so this first one up top, it's hard to read, but in the police department, we had a community service officer, .48 FT, basically half-time, no benefits. That position, unfortunately, became vacant late last fiscal year. I think it was May or June, when that employee left. So what we're recommending right now is to freeze that position. You also have a second CSO that's funded through the tobacco grant. We're saying, don't touch that one. Matter of fact, that one's filled. Let's continue with that. But with this one right now, because of the budget constraints we're under, to freeze that position. So that's what that's all about. We also have an engineering technician. That position, actually, the employee was out on disability, and is, well, I don't want to go into too much detail because it's a personnel matter, but, will most likely retire here shortly. So, again, looking at, freezing that position. However, we recognize the engineering department's very busy, and we have things we got to do. So there's, the idea of adding, a GIS contract, and the amount there, it's, down below, it's the last, ED line there for $11,250. That would be for 9 months. So I think full strength for a year, it's recommended at 15. Now, that's an experiment. We may need more, but for right now, that's what we're recommending. Rebecca, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep.
Okay. And then we had, an engineering specialist. So that position, the employee, will be retiring, here soon. And that position covers our development CIP inspections. And so what we're recommending is, okay, let's go ahead and freeze that position, but again, we need to add contract services, so there's $29,819 for a construction, or development project inspection contract. And then we have a second line item of $18,439 for a CIP project inspection contract. Both of those are cost recovered through fees or project, funding. So the CIP, if we're funding let's say RSTP, or I'm dating myself.
Like
some other-
Street?
Spring Street, yeah, where it's Measure L, we can recover that cost through the project because it's directly benefiting the project. Thank you. In IT, we have a retirement and a potential, with attrition, movement in that division. And so what we're recommending right now is freezing the information technology analyst position, with the understanding that there would be movement in that position. And then contracting out, we still need support in our mostly networking. And so for right now, and this is, I'm concerned this may be a little bit too low, but we have $5,000 there for that type of service. That may have to increase a little bit. And again, if they're working on a project, those costs could be recovered. Say if we're doing an
They
IT
charge
project.
by the hour, or does it contract?
Usually by the hour, yeah. If it's a large project, they may,
Low for,
I was gonna,
yeah. It is for 9 months, but, so we may have, that's spread across general fund, water, sewer, and our parking, but,
One thing I want to mention, I've talked to our IT people, and, the fact that, we've upgraded quite a bit of equipment over the last year, in fact. New servers for all of our, email accounts. I think they just finished, Chief Wren's, building. So all of our buildings have been completed now, which gives us a lot more stability especially during power outages, that we can keep up and running, for all of our offices. But the other thing that means, there's less day-to-day maintenance for those. And so we think that's gonna help us in terms of that and what we need to have people there to take care of that. So it should affect this also. We've also, if you recall, last year was basically the first year of major replacement of computer equipment. So again, newer computers, we're not gonna have as much maintenance on those, keeping those running. Unfortunately, this year, due to this problem, we rolled that back a year. So some of our older computers may add to that need, but we'll monitor that, and hopefully we can, if we have to adjust a little bit, we will.
Thanks, Clay. Okay, parking enforcement, we have about a half-time position in parking enforcement that actually, there was a layoff back, when was it, April or May?
Yeah, probably about April.
And so we haven't filled that position since, and we think for right now, you've seen, the parking situation, it's not as heavy as it used to be before COVID. And it may be that way for a while, I'm hoping not.
the gentleman is still doing it, the lady isn't there anymore, right?
So she was gone for a while. We had two men that were employees
Oh,
doing
okay.
that. And one of them, a layoff, yes, but he voluntarily left too.
Oh.
He was not comfortable doing it during COVID, so it worked out to the benefit of him.
It was mutual.
I imagine as soon as the, court starts, ramping back up,
That will
that
increase
will
it.
strongly affect our parking.
You're right. And full capacity restaurants, seating, someday, not soon, I hope.
So, and Dave will go through this a little later too, I believe, Dave, but the parking fund is doing still okay, based on our projections.
Relatively
So,
speaking, yeah.
yeah.
We've just, we've considered COVID in our revenue projections, but yeah, it's doing okay.
Is the courthouse still paying their share since nobody's using it,
For their parking,
their parking?
yeah, as far as I know.
As far as I know, yeah. Changes there. Okay, and then in the finance department, we have a retirement of an accounting assistant two, in September, this month. And, we're looking at, backfilling that with an accounting assistant one, probably the first or second, most likely the first step, so there's savings there. And when you look at these numbers, just so you know, we've included the total cost. Some of these don't look so big, but when you consider, you know, they're cashing out of their vacation, for example, if they were offered the incentive, there's those one-time costs. But again, overall, on an ongoing basis to the general fund, it's about $391,000. We're showing here the general fund, $64,637 for, cost recovery, and then you can see the other, funds there as well, parking and water sewer, so. And these are, you know, ones we've talked about. There were additional ones that we felt, we didn't have to do, and so.
Maybe I'll mention that just quickly. When we talked to you last May, I believe we were considering potentially having to freeze another police officer position. We've avoided that, in what we're recommending going forward. We also potentially looked at freezing, or actually possibly even a layoff of our, code enforcement officer. And we were able to avoid that also. with
Oh,
the
thank goodness.
Budget that we, so,
I'm glad to hear that.
so those positions will remain intact.
Okay. Any additional questions about the ASR? Positions? Now let's take a look.
I do have a question, so on the officers, and so where did that, I know we were down a couple anyway, so where does that leave us in
We
terms of?
are still down. The important part is that what we were looking at, if we would have had to do that, we would have had at least one shift where we would have gone down to a two-person rather than a three-person shift. This will, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but this will avoid that having to happen. So we'll have three-person shifts throughout our,
24 by.
yeah, 24/7, yes. And that was what we were really concerned about and what we're trying to avoid. We are still down, at least one. We're trying to talk about, there's maybe something back in the past that we haven't corrected yet, but we're still down, one officer that we froze actually last year that was a vacant position. So we're at least down that one position, and, Chief Wren and I are gonna have a discussion about, how we move forward and what we can do in the coming year to begin to build that and build on to make sure we have what we need, going forward. I feel, let's say, more comfortable with not having to freeze this other officer position. That's really a good step forward that helps us. But we need to continue to look at it and see what we can do to, keep them secure, so.
And Dave, so a follow-up on that, I mean, in terms of, because obviously it was a pleasant surprise where we were to some degree, but we also know we don't know. So do we have enough resiliency, so if we are funding,
Yeah, so you may recall when we looked at our, mid-year budget report the second time, we were forecasting about $1 million general fund deficit. We're still not done closing the books. There's still some revenue streams that are coming in and expenditures being posted, but, we think we're gonna end up with about a $500,000 deficit. We started out with about $2 million in the bank, if you will, so that would leave us $1.5 million. So we're entering in with more cash than we expected, so that's good. And, quarter by quarter, we'll be sharing that with you, and if it looks like, we're gonna have to cut back, we'll do what has to be done. So, we'll make recommendations to you and let you consider those things.
Do you think things are gonna change much between now and our next meeting where you're gonna be meeting with HDL, early next week?
Yeah, this is really to go through the second quarter, so to look at the detail, at the next time we meet with them.
Yeah, next week, all we do is we're not meeting with them, we just get the detailed reports.
Correct.
So you're kinda thinking we're going quarter by quarter this year. Is that kind of in the head?
Yeah,
It's
I
been
mean,
planned?
we always kinda do that, but this one, we're really,
Yeah.
we got the foot on the pedal, on the
Yeah.
brake pedal, and so
Right.
we're ready to press if we have to, so usually we keep our foot on the floor.
Pressing pretty good so far.
Yeah.
We did.
Next, we're gonna need volunteers.
Yeah.
So that, the information from HDL will give us more detail, like if there's like double payments and other things to show like,
That,
we can,
correct, that's something I asked right out of the gate. There's one vendor, on Placerville Drive where that's happened, and, or one merchant, I should say. And it can be significant, and, the answer was, they're not aware of that, so, because usually it affects every town that merchant's in. So, I'm confident that that isn't one of the issues, but we can look into that further. I mean,
Okay.
until they have the raw data, we just don't know for sure. That's a great question. Okay, let's move on to kind of the bottom line.
Which was that, Kara, do you have any, we
Oh.
can't see you, so I just wanna, I know you would probably say it, but do you have any questions?
I did have a question. Dave, if you can scroll back up to those positions that we were,
You got it.
for the freeze engineering specialist, the net cost is 4,941, and then the total cost is 43,317.
It looks funny. That's because there's an overhead component. So, when we, we can actually recover on some projects overhead, and so
Okay.
it pushes it over. But, when you look at it from an ongoing basis, just the position itself, there's savings there.
Okay. All right.
Good observation. Any other questions?
Not for me
Okay.
so far.
Okay, the bottom line. So, when you look at this, so this is your draft budget, and it's by fund. The city has, believe it or not, 40 different funds, which are a separate set of books. And so we have a column for each fund, because we can't commingle funds. The general fund in the far left corner, we're showing $9.1 million. Almost all the revenue in the general fund have remained the same since your last budget workshop, except for sales tax. So we've adjusted sales tax. On the expenditure side, the only thing, we changed was the fact that we got the, coronavirus relief fund, the $135,000. And I think it's $87,000 that we're actually going to receive. There, it's right there. Yeah, $81,000. So, of that, for your hot team officer, we relieved the general fund of those costs, and we're bearing those under the coronavirus relief fund. So we did change that. All of the other expenditures are the same. I will caution you, there are some programs in the Community Services Department that are pretty fluid right now. It's looking like, for example, the youth basketball program, there's a good chance we're not gonna be able to do that program because of COVID. But it's pretty much, self-sustaining, meaning that the fees we collect cover the direct cost of the program. So the net effect is pretty minimal, if none. So there's a few programs like that in community services where Terry's working on that right now, of fine-tuning that. So when we present the proposed budget, you may see revenue shrink a little bit and expenditures, but the end result's about the same.
That goes the same for, minimum wage as well, that's all recovered in the cost of the program.
Correct. We assumed the minimum wage increase in your budget. Transfers, the, transfer to your Measure J fund went down because Measure J revenue performed better, and we anticipate it performing better in 2021. So we did adjust the transfers out for that. So what you end up, instead of, 664, actually, a little bit more than that, but our deficit at that point is $478,826. The other budget adjustments, of $623,000 you've already seen. We had that long list of cuts that we showed you, so that number hasn't changed. We talked about the ASLs in the yellow. General fund share is $16,379. Other budget adjustments, so with all of these ASLs, we have attrition, we have movement, we have people coming and going, within the city, outside the city, especially in the police department with some of the changes we made. Because we have a new chief, and so he was promoted. We have other positions where people will be moving, hopefully promoted into other positions. So there creates a lot of differences in your budget. So what we did is we captured that in that other budget adjustments, number 2, that $132,000, that's what that is.
But the salary schedule has remained the same.
The salary schedule has remained the same.
So
And the reason that's positive is because we have our, incentive pay, in there as well, and cash outs. So on a one-time basis, a lot of it's causing an increase, but that's coming up.
just because,
Yeah, it's an additional cost we didn't assume in the budget originally. So that's assumed there. Computer equipment, Cleve mentioned, we replaced almost all of our computer equipment, so we're saying, let's hold off on that right now. We can at least, take a year off. Other capital outlay requests, same as last time, $6,500 in the blue. CIP requests, for the general fund, there's none there, but the other funds, like we talked about earlier. Conference training and travel, no change there in the green, $7,708. So the, other budget requests, adjustments, equals $492,851, savings net, and so you end up with a $14,000 surplus. So we have a balanced budget.
oh,
That's assuming our sales tax, all of our revenues, come to fruition, and costs within what we budgeted. So, congratulations, you have a balanced general fund.
congratulations
I was
to you.
wondering if we'd ever get there, at least in the next month or so. Gas tax, no change there. Measure L, Rebecca kind of covered what the budget is. The revenues did go up to $2.2 million, based on our forecast. Parking, no change, other than, ASLs and the other budget adjustments. One thing I want to caution the council, and the chief may want to chime in on this, is last year we had our high school resource officer contract. And that got cut short with COVID because the kids are studying from home. This year, we started out studying online, so no SRO, but we're hoping in October that, and potentially it could be both the high school and the school, elementary school, the practical school district. So we're hoping that this revenue expended, that budget will stay within that budget, but if we don't, we'll be back to talk with you about that and ask for direction. But for right now, that one police officer position, we're hoping that will, hold there. Let's see.
One FTE.
Correct. It's actually, it's one position, but it's for 10 months.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
That's lower amount.
Yeah.
Is that full-time? Do they spend 8 hours a day?
Yeah, well, that's their assignment, yeah. So so the districts pay 75%, and then the city pays the other 25. So they're working for the school for those 10 months while school is in session. And we do have a verbal commitment from both superintendents that they want to continue with the program. We just haven't gotten the contract to them yet, because they're obviously busy trying to figure out how they're gonna run things. But they support the program and want to continue with it. So it is a full-time police officer assigned to them for 10 months. He deals strictly with any school issues that come up. And then, during the summer, we get him back to the organization, and he's then, either backfills on patrol, so there's a reduction in overtime expenditure for officers to take vacation.
Oh,
Or we'll put him with, hot team, or
Ah.
a special project, traffic enforcement. So for 2 months, he's really a utilitarian officer. for
Okay.
us. That 10 months, he's
and is he, on call for like emergencies, if you have to call in extra help for
Yeah.
overtime?
Yeah, he's available. He also assists in investigations, and we've had him, kids not showing up back at home after getting off school, so we had to call him back in to assist in liaisoning between the school district and the police department.
Ah,
Which is a
okay.
very seamless, interaction and
Okay.
relationship. So it works out, it's just great. It's a big benefit.
Well, especially to have an officer that knows kids.
Yeah,
You know.
making that connection. I mean,
Exactly.
there are the tangible that are positive.
Right.
Are, it's a great program. I don't wanna see it go anywhere.
Officer Bob, remember Officer Bob?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
my
yeah.
gosh.
That's Officer Chris.
Looking over to Measure J, everything else is, the same. Measure J, our revenue forecast is greater, therefore our transfer in from the general fund is less. LMD funds are balanced. See, the Ridge at Orchard Hill, Zone 1A, we are showing that $20,000 for the slurry seal project, the wine sap project. That will come out of fund balance, which right now, those funds are sitting on about $200,000 for deferred maintenance, so,
Good.
not a problem there.
And then the playground there, I know we batted this around a lot, but that's kind of,
That's one of the things, you know, you've asked us to look at the, Orchard Hill LMD,
Right.
because it doesn't have an inflator, and, Terry, I don't know if you wanna address the playground
That's
equipment there.
separate from these funds that we're talking.
That's something that,
that's not part of this.
No,
it's not,
right, Dave?
it's actually, the budget is the Orchard Hill, this one right here, Orchard Hill LMD,
Oh, I got you, okay.
yeah. So it's pretty minimal. I mean, the playground equipment, I forget how much
But
it
the
is.
one that we're paying for the slurry seal is different than.
That's a different.
Yeah, so when you're driving down Mallard Lane, to the right is the Ridge at Orchard Hill LMD, and then the Ridge at Orchard Hill is on the left, that's what we got,
Right.
Okay.
which is a BAD.
It would be so nice when trees grow up around there, 'cause it looks so uninviting right now.
So, and then your water enterprise fund has a balanced budget. Your sewer enterprise fund, we're showing, you may recall, we're transferring in, the full Measure H revenues into your sewer enterprise fund to help with the coverage ratio for our debt coverage. And then we're showing you the new projects under CIP of $260,000, but as Rebecca indicated, she has other projects that she would like to existing projects to fund, and then she also has the construction reserve, which we're not showing as an expenditure because we're not actually appropriating it yet, but, so that's why you have that $294,000 surplus there, it looks like, but it's actually, we have plans for that, so.
So the construction reserve would come out of the revenue.
Yeah, once we get the cash, then we would reserve that, as long as that's something you wanna do, and the policy works for you, then we would proceed with that, yeah. So Measure H, you can see the transfer out, you know, the 1.1 million, and then going right into your sewer enterprise fund there. General liability for your property and general liability insurance, we bill the general fund and water and sewer funds for that. So in total, you have about a $23,470,813 budget. And before, with the capital projects we're talking about, you have a surplus of 2.2 million. But again, when you figure the construction reserves and the funding for the other projects, the existing projects, you're basically at a balanced budget, so. So that's our kind of our draft budget that we're gonna be proposing to you on September 8th. If there's any assumptions or things you would like us to change, please let us know. I know, like, for example, the building permit software, we'll be looking at that, to see if that's something that we can proceed with, or,
Can we look at the, 'cause it always just stuck with me, 'cause it seemed like such a de minimis amount in some regards, but the $1,000 for Nick and some, equipment, just drill and some other stuff, it was like $900 or whatever.
Tools.
Like, tools, yeah, like power tools.
I thought
Power-
we funded that.
Did we end up getting the money?
I think.
Okay, good.
You notice we had on there, under the capital outlay, we had the $6,500 It's on the previous page. I think it is
Is
included.
it in there? Okay,
Yeah.
that's,
I'll
We
verify.
certainly talked about it in
we
our-
did, 'cause I just stuck, I was just like,
I know.
we gotta find that, and I know.
Yeah, we didn't go through those, 6,500, but I believe we, in the end, we included that.
The traffic control signs we did, the toolkit we did not.
Oh, let's think about that.
I mean, if we can find a way to, 'cause it was like $900, wasn't it, I think?
Yeah, it was $950.
Yes.
That water sewer.
He's right.
Good timing, guys.
That would be my one request, if we could look at that, if somehow to get that, I think it would
Good
work.
you thought of
I mean,
that.
all the work that Nick and his crew does, to get him, he doesn't have to run to one, you know, up to the yard, yeah, I think would be helpful.
Okay, we'll take a look at that.
Thank you.
I completely agree with that.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Any other
Questions?
adjustments or questions? Yeah, comments.
Kara,
I'm
any?
shocked that we're at a balanced budget right now.
You're what?
I am just in shock that we are at a balanced budget right now.
Yeah, I just, I'm hoping it'll stick. We'll see, you know, this is an election year, which the first half will, typically are rosier, but it's unusual times with the pandemic, but, we'll see how it goes. And if things don't pan out, we'll be back to ask for your help.
They're gonna pan out. It's gonna be fine.
I like your thinking.
I like it.
I like the optimism.
Wait till,
What is our,
cannabis,
current
you know?
work week
That's
for our
gonna-
code enforcement person?
Pardon?
What is our
Like you and
current
I are
funding
gonna
for
have
our
a celebration.
code enforcement?
Fif-
How many hours?
50% is full-time, but it's 50% general fund and 50% tobacco grant.
But it is 40 hours a week.
Correct.
Right.
And that's still going on.
Yes. Yeah, that was one that we were concerned about, but with this budget, we're proposing
Which one is that?
the code enforcement officer.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm so happy to hear that.
She's really made, that position has really made some significant changes
Yep.
with the fire, vegetation management.
Right. We were very concerned about that too, and
Right.
what that would do, so anyway, yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Wow,
Well, my-
congratulations, Ed.
Mayor, back
Thank
to
you.
you.
Thanks for your.
All right, so any other comments?
We do,
Oh, public
we should
comment.
open up for
That's
public.
true, yeah.
Oh,
So Regina, are you still with us?
Still here, Mr. Mayor.
there she is.
There you are. All right, we're gonna go ahead and open up, for, public comments.
Okay, public comment is open for item 6.1. If you are joining by phone, please press *9 on your phone if you'd like to speak. You'll have 3 minutes, and I will remind you when you have 30 seconds remaining. We just have one attendee, Mr. Mayor, and I don't see them raising their hand, so I don't believe we have any public comments.
Okay, then we'll bring it back to the council. Anything else for the good of the order? All right, well, seeing none, Dave, everybody, thank you very much. It is pretty amazing that we're at a balanced budget. Hopefully, you know, we'll stay, each quarter stays the way, you know, like this,
Right.
so. Again, thank you, everybody, and, this meeting is adjourned.